Hello and welcome back to Learn It from a Layman. I am Carl Christensen. I am joined today by Tim. I shake middle schoolers down for their lunch money, Cox.
Well, now it's all plastic, so it's harder to do. You just have to
That's true.
know how to hack and launder digitally.
That's probably what you taught in your computer class, isn't it? For
Oh,
middle school?
certainly, yes, we were very advanced.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, nowadays, when you're teaching a seventh grader how to do anything on the computer, you're really reminding yourself how to do it, and they're playing games while you know, they already knew how to do what you were teaching
You
them,
know,
right?
you would think that, but you would think wrong. I um
Really?
I thought that when I first started, doing computer stuff, and yeah, it's really it's not that they don't have a lot of tech savvy and skills, but it's
Mhm.
often not it's very spotty, very hit and miss, and they're most, I would say, maybe not all, but most are missing critical skills that are kind of basic to functioning as an adult um, at a computer. Things like typing skills, how to manage files. Um,
Right, right.
and so it just sure they can hack their parents digital babysitter software, but they don't know how to find the file they were created yesterday. And
Right.
so
Well, I
it's there's definitely a lot of education that I have to do with my kids when we're doing digital, for sure.
okay. Well, we're gonna talk some computer stuff about middle school for sure. Like, specifically, the thing I think we're gonna get to that I think that's the most interesting. We have some younger listeners, and then obviously we have college age, and then even old guys like us, Tim. But,
Yeah.
most interesting thing is, the information that I have, and I have this multiple sources about, social media and, cell phones in middle school. So that's a teaser. I'm getting
Ooh,
better at this.
okay.
So, but to
And
start off
Carl,
with, we're gonna talk a little bit.
I just want to note for the record here, someday soon the day is coming when you make a crack about us old guys, and it will no longer be humorous.
Well, some would say it's not humorous right now. Uh,
Touche.
okay. Okay. So the interesting thing. Okay, so let's start with, and we have some international listeners. So just a quick, rundown.
Technically, I'm an international from most other people's perspective.
Okay. Yes.
I'm just being snarky with you. So.
Useful. I guess that warms us up for the middle school subject. We are talking about basics of middle school, in case I haven't already.
That's true. Interrupting you when you're talking, yes, all those things.
Okay, middle school is in the United States generally grades 6 through 8. It can be different variations of that. Sometimes it's called junior high. Junior high, I think if they call it junior high, Tim, maybe the grades tend more towards 7 to 9. Uh, but I've
Yeah.
heard it
So
referred to as both.
in
Right?
yeah, a lot of schools, at least in Arizona, will do junior high being seventh and eighth. We used to have junior high 7 through 9. Actually, when I first started teaching, it was at a 7 through 9, but now that's pretty much all but disappeared, and the nines have all gone to high schools. So now mostly, at least around here, we see mostly seventh and eighth in junior high. We do have sometimes a sixth through eighth. The school I'm at right now is a middle school, and it's 6 through 8, but that's less common.
Right. Right. So we have, yeah, generally 6 through 8 in California as well. Like I said, I think it does vary by locality, even in the United States. Obviously, Arizona being different, California, East Coast potentially, but there's kind of this general middle school period of 6 to 8, or thereabouts. And so that you're talking about kids between 11 and 14 years old. And this is a big jump for, I'd say, the vast majority of public school students, a big change in how education is done. going from elementary school into middle school. Um, Specifically, we're talking about going from generally one core teacher, right? As an elementary school student, you get one specific teacher, and suddenly in middle school, you're talking about potentially going to different teacher for every subject. Not in every case, but in a lot of cases, you're talking about six different teachers or six or seven. Six. Okay, we're not going to do that. Um, you missed it, Tim.
Darn it.
You missed it. I know. It's okay. It's months ago now. Um, December. Okay.
No,
So
sorry, Carl. I'm just
I know,
blah.
I know, I know. It's okay, Tim. So in case those that have not been listening to the podcast for a long time, Tim is a middle school teacher. Unique insight into this, but I'm a father of multiple children that are either currently in middle school or have gone through the middle school ringer, the gauntlet, if you will, of middle school. I would like to refer to it as the armpit of life. Um, it is one of the more challenging time periods, and therefore one of the more challenging educational times in kids' lives as well. So
I
there
call it
are.
the larval period of human development.
That's correct. So in the United States, statistically, we're talking about somewhere between 12 and 13 million students in that age group. 20,000 plus middle schools nationwide, and most middle schools, I guess. And I'm once again just looking up statistics before the podcast. It looks like you have a range, obviously, in the size of middle school, but an average middle school is somewhere between 500 all the way down to 800 students. And how does that track with what you've seen? The
Yeah,
size of
yeah.
student or body.
The schools I've taught at generally in that range, 500 to 700 maybe. I think my first school we were probably bigger than that when we had 3 grades there, but then when the ninth graders went away, I was back down to that 700-ish range. So that'll change, depending as neighborhoods and communities change the you know, so you'll see enrollment dwindle and schools open. So, anyways, but yeah,
Yeah. So obviously, yeah, it changes. Every school varies from year to year, but this is a student body that I'd say is a little smaller than your average elementary school. Obviously, by size of or by number of grades, but even by student body. I'd imagine your average middle school, though I didn't look this up, is a little bit bigger than your average middle school.
Wait, your average middle schooler is bigger than what?
What did I say? Sorry. No, your average sized elementary school. Is that slightly larger? I
Oh,
don't know
the
what I
the
said.
campus?
Oh, no, like the student body at an elementary school. When kids move from elementary to middle school, are they going to a bigger student body or are they actually going to a slightly smaller student body?
I would assume bigger, but I don't know actually. I'm really not too familiar with elementary schools, so
I work on that, Tim.
yeah.
Um,
But I'm guessing it's bigger because I know that you'll have more than 2 elementary schools feeding into a single junior high. And so let's say you have 3 elementary schools feeding into a single junior high. You have, so that's 3 times each grade level, 10, 6, so it would be 6. Um, I guess it would be approximately the same if you had 3 elementary schools feeding into it. So I don't know.
right.
It's a
I
long
don't know
way to
either.
say I don't know.
A quick Google says that no, it's generally the middle school is a little bigger than your elementary. Anyway, that was a really off-topic, unnecessary discussion because we're now going to move on to
Wouldn't that
the
characterize our podcast in general?
point.
Uh,
Um,
Off topic.
yes, very on brand.
That's right.
Okay, what you see in middle school is a starting. So I think I've heard before that everything you need to know in life you've learned in elementary, and everything after that's fluff. um, think that's entirely true, but from a math point of view, I think the middle school is the last time you learn something that you are going to absolutely need in pretty much any job, right? Because middle school is also where you start doing algebra. And so once you have some basic algebraic skills, some kids take geometry or some basic level geometry in middle school as well. And so arguably, if you've done that in middle school, you've already learned things in middle school that you're going to use for the rest of your life. And once you move into high school, calculus, pre-calculus, those types of things, if you're doing a STEM, job in the future, obviously going to be relevant, but not for everyone. So middle school is a crucial time for learning of math and using the kind of putting final touches on your algebraic and geometric understanding of mathematics. Um, it is also a place I know that, at least for us locally, and it's where you start seeing kids stratify a little bit more, aided by the educational system. So there are like GATE programs in elementary that's gifted. I don't know what it stands for. Gifted learners, essentially. But in our, at
Mhm.
least in Southern California, nothing happens with GATE identified children. They don't. There's literally nothing. In middle school, that starts to stratify actually a little bit. Kids can start qualifying for higher level math courses. You can take honors classes, that type of stuff. And so start seeing that some stratification, and that's going to come up here in just a second with how kids perform in middle school. But this is obviously then the time where kids are starting to hit puberty, and therefore things start to happen.
Yes, yes, indeed.
The- As Tim can speak to, but um, this is also then obviously, Tim, where teachers start to become specialists rather than I teach everything, right?
Sure.
Um, you don't teach math, Tim, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Gratefully and mercifully so. Um,
I've got great respect for math, but it does regard me with disdain. So, and,
yes, it does. I regard you with the similar. Okay, never mind. The
Um, I will say this about specialization. So in junior high, yes, you have specialization. So um, uh, I only teach one subject in a given class. And in that way, it's similar to high school and college. However, there is also a little more flexibility there. For example, I got my degree in English, and I started my career teaching junior high English. But as other things were needed or available, I've been able to diversify pretty easily. I taught a creative writing course. I taught computer basics. I've taught. They needed someone to teach like a digital media, photography, and video class, and so I kind of studied on YouTube and started teaching that. So in junior high, there's a little more. In high school, you wouldn't really be able to get away with that quite as easily. A digital media class, for example, in high school, you definitely need to be taught by someone who has industrial level skill and training. In junior high, it's still a little bit of that kind of exploratory, and so there's a little more flexibility. I taught French, for even though I don't speak French, but
wait, so
so
you taught French?
well, in my defense, it was a a French Spanish sampler course. It was one semester, and so you did 1/4 of Spanish and 1/4 of French. So I did a 1/4 of intro level basic French. And since I study French as a hobby, it was something that I was able to do all right, kind of like, hey, so this is French, here, let's try some stuff out kind of thing. Not a like a full-on French 101 class. But you can do things like that in junior high. There's a lot more flexibility, and while we try not to put too much attention on this, junior high is kind of like elementary school in the fact that nothing sticks. A kid can, flunk all over the place in junior high, and it's not going to show up on when they go to apply for a college or a job. No one is checking junior high school transcripts. Um, So aside from the effect it might have on opportunities you have when enrolling for stuff in high school, junior high is pretty flexible in that way, as it should be.
Comme ci, comme ça, and avec mon chien.
Oui, oui, c'est un arc de triomphe.
C'est la vie. And je t'aime, ma pouce.
Arrivederci. Oh,
Okay. All right. Back to middle
we
school.
drove.
Let's talk about a couple things before. This is going to be a shorter podcast, as middle school should be. Middle school pay. I was always under the impression, Tim, and I think you led me to believe that middle school teachers actually made more. Maybe you didn't actually tell me that, but I was anyway.
So
High
that
school teachers.
in Arizona, that's not the case. I do know that in I believe in Utah, where a couple of my sisters are educators, they have a thing where they do pay middle school teachers more. I think it's partly related to like a slightly longer schedule or something like that. They work a little bit more. But yeah, here in Arizona, though, that's not the case, tragically.
Too bad.
Yeah.
It makes sense to me that like market wise, you might have to pay them anyway. I guess it's just pretty close to high school. Is the kind of the U.S. Wide median pay for a teacher, middle school and high school are very close to each other. It makes sense to me that from this kind of an economic supply demand type of thing, you might have to incentivize teachers to teach middle school just because it's a difficult time of kids' lives. They're not as big or as intimidating as high schoolers, but they're also more sassy and dealing with more issues potentially, or at least starting to. I don't know. Anyway,
have less developed prefrontal cortices, and
yeah,
so
that's right. But we all know that we get into teaching for the money, so I think that
that's
was an
right.
important thing to address.
Yeah. And you mentioned market influence, which there is no market influence in
That's true.
teacher salary or better. I mean,
Actually
I
irrelevant.
suppose there always is, but it's not a free and open market. It's not like other things where you can just, go get a higher paying job elsewhere. Generally, the only market influence is what's the district next door paying, and generally districts in the same area will need to compensate similar. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. I mean, there's some market type things at play, but certainly not. It's certainly not an open market, at least not in the United States. Okay, the couple things I wanted to touch on before we talk about that thing I teased at the beginning, which is social media and cell phones. The middle school is also kind of the start where you see kids starting to really struggle and identify themselves as academically poor. That happens, I think, significantly less in elementary school. As they get in the middle school and start underperforming, this is where you start getting behavioral issues. Obviously, those are not entirely absent from elementary, but it's just, I think, a exponential growth in those issues in middle school.
I think you have in elementary school. There's generally kids are young enough, and there's still kind of an eager to please aspect that for not for all kids, of course, but it's more common with kids that age. You think about a kindergartner class, everyone wants to sit next to the teacher or that kind of thing. You're pleased when the teacher is pleased with you. That kind of thing. Once you start getting into junior high, middle school age, it's funny because you kind of see that. Like I see seventh graders who come in and still kind of have that. By the time they're leaving the school at eighth grade, it definitely a bit more that it's cool not to be, in good with the teacher, and kids kind of identifying themselves in opposition to authority,
Mm-hmm.
whereas before they were, identifying themselves with, a positive view
Right.
on authority figures.
Right. right. And so that's kind of the transition that middle school teachers have to deal with, and it's a difficult one. But it is also the case that in middle school, so the statistic I saw, it's about a third of eighth graders are considered proficient in math and reading in the United States. Um, that's a truly sad number. One third. Now, proficiency standards, I'd be interested in to see what the the metrics are that we are reaching for. What does proficiency look like? But it is unquestionable that even to the level of basic mathematics and basic reading comprehension and writing skills, it is an unfortunate reality that approximately two out of every three American eighth graders are already struggling severely. So that is a sobering take for both of those of you that are currently in middle school that are listening, high schoolers, and then parents. There's a strong probability that if your kid's not one of those kids that's struggling, they know a lot of them. And so to encourage and to continue to try to aid and be an active participant in your child's learning, and not just leave it on the teachers, because it's obviously overwhelming. The teachers cannot, which is obviously borne out in statistics. If it's one third of eighth graders that are proficient, then we need to step up our game as parents. So that's my take, Tim. What is your take?
I share concern. Certainly, I think that the so I in some ways don't. I'm not alarmist about it. I think part of my reason for that is that the kind of heightened concern for the rising generation narrative has been pretty much going on steadily for the past, probably 60 to 80 years. I think that, where people have been concerned about what's going on with these kids. And one thing that I feel like happens is that people, we rise to or fill the roles that we occupy. And so what we have right now is a bunch of knucklehead kids, not all, of course, but there's a bunch who are maybe not doing, who certainly aren't doing well. And what's going to happen with a lot of them is they're going to eventually graduate or drop out of school, and most of them are then going to have to enter the real world and actually start caring and doing a good job, and most of them will adapt. They'll eventually train up on skills that they were deficient in order to do the jobs that society needs them to do, and they'll be fine. So I am not concerned that we're going to fall apart at the seams simply because we have, 2/3 of eighth graders are not proficient in math and writing yet. We're going to move on as a society, and things will find a way. That said, I think what we are looking at and what we're already seeing is that people who are maybe have diminished skills have more limited options as far as their futures are concerned. And so this plays a role in, for example, income inequality. So if we look at these eighth graders, that third that are proficient, I'm going to place two bets. One, I'm going to bet that they are going to trend a lot wealthier than the one third that are proficient are going to trend a lot wealthier than the 2/3 who aren't. So
Right.
we're seeing a difference in preparation, in support, and in their ability to activate their native talents. And my second bet will be that 20 years from now, 40 years from now, that third is going to be a lot wealthier, of course. It's not much of a bet, no duh. But so I think while I don't share an alarmist view that this is the end, I do think that this is a cause for concern, and it plays into the struggles that our society faces and will continue to face. And as educators, part of our job and as parents is um, to work to improve that situation. And so yeah, I certainly think it's a problem, and I certainly think efforts to fix it are laudable and important. I just like to keep that context because I think, and sometimes teachers were guilty of this as much as anyone else, of casting our occupation and our profession as this super important thing, which it is. It's valuable, and that's why I became a teacher. But let's not fool ourselves. People got along without teachers for thousands of years, and while I take my job seriously and I believe it's valuable, I also recognize that things are going to be fine. And just because there's problems in education doesn't mean that the world's falling apart. And sometimes we have to just take a little bit of perspective and look at ourselves with a little bit of humility and say, you know what, maybe we're not as important as we thought we were.
Right, so this just in, middle school teacher says middle school teachers are unnecessary. Join us. What?
That's right. Teacher defrocked and deported. That's right.
Yes. Okay. Well, I mean, if this were a pure opinion podcast, we could talk about this for a long time, Tim. But I think it is useful to have insight from parent and a teacher, and then just look at the statistics and be real about what we're looking at. Let's talk a little bit about behavior and how that relates to social media and cell phones. So I've already talked about suspensions, behavioral issues start coming up in middle school. It is gender based also, like girls start outperforming boys. I mean, it happens in elementary as well, but you see more stratification with girls outperforming boys in reading and what's the other subject it said? Anyway, a couple subjects where girls are outperforming boys, and in math, it's about even. It's a push. And that holds true. But this is also where boys start falling behind as far as organizational skills. Boys start acting out more. Obviously, the puberty aspect coming into play here. And so girls are more likely to excel in school at this point. So reading and writing are the things girls outperforming boys. It happens in middle school, but it stratifies and becomes more noticeable in middle school. And boys then starting lacking engagement. Boys don't engage at school in the same way as the girls do. So they have a higher probability of dropping out in high school, and then organizationally just struggling, and then dealing with discipline issues in school. So all of those things are working against boys. So that's something to take into consideration. But the things, cell phones and social media, this is where, this has been really important for me. I've got 3 kids. One is currently in middle school, a daughter that moved into high school this year, and then a son that's moving towards graduating from high school. Social media influence and cell phone usage in middle school is very, it's become something that's been studied. I know my middle school invited all teachers in the last couple of years to have a lunchtime presentation with the children present to discuss cell phones and social media and how it affects children. And I had never heard this before. I'd always wondered, maybe I hadn't done enough research online, but when kids should have access to phones, according to experts, people that study this and try to figure it out instead of just opining and guessing as parents often do. And what it blew me away, it's useful for me to know, but experts recommend that kids do not have access to a smartphone until on the earliest expert analysis said maybe 11, but most experts seem to tend more towards 13 years old. Let's say before 13, access to smartphones is bad for them emotionally, mentally, physically, all of the above, really. And that was the first time I'd seen that in writing presented to me as a parent in my kids' middle school. So that was really useful. Now, not to be hypocritical, I have gotten my kids phones a little before that. because situationally, as a parent, as I'm sure many, if some parents are listening, sometimes they need it. For my kids are involved in sports. If I don't have a phone, I don't know when to pick them up. There are situations where they might need it. Do they need a smartphone in that case? Anyway, there's all types of things to consider as a parent, but expert people that want to take care of your children and have studied the data seem to show that the ideal timing, if you're going to give them a smartphone, would be sometime around 13. So,
And
like I said,
and I'll just
multiple
add
studies.
a wrinkle there. I say I would say the conclusion they're drawing is not that that's when you should get your kid a cell phone. What they're saying is absolutely, don't do it before that.
Sure.
It's, and it's kind of like one of those things where it's like, okay, if everyone is going to be drinking alcohol, well, let's at the least make sure they're, not giving it to kids, so it's harmful in all cases. But if you can't avoid it, then at least put it off as long as possible. And yeah, they gave the age of 13. And again, I'm not sure if that's more, because I know that's the age that was established by the by law in the United States. I think in the late 90s, or was it the early 2000s? You know, that you have to be at least 13 to like create an account with certain,
Okay.
with like
Yes.
and so that was kind of established in that law. But I mean, it just, if you're a parent and you're considering getting your kid into social media, just don't. 13 or after. They need a phone. That's fine. Get them a phone without social media, and because it's becoming clearer and clearer as the data shakes out that it has direct and harmful effects on kids, and especially on girls.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's the other part here. So smartphones and social media to me always went separate because we got our kids smartphones. My son got it when I think he was about to turn 13. He was still 12, but he was close to 13. So, all right. My daughter was on a travel softball team, and so we kind of got forced, our hand got forced sooner than we wanted it to. I think she was 11. So I'm not proud of it, but we did what we had to do. But what we didn't do and what we held out strong is they had um, no social media until very recently. So my son has he was now 17, has access to most of your normal social media as of really recently. So, and my daughter, who's now 15, just has some, not all, and she just got access to some of it as well. So, and like Tim said, and this is once again, so instead of an opinion podcast, this is useful for um, organizations like American Academy of Pediatrics and the U.S. Surgeon General advise delaying social media access until somewhere between 13 and 16, and in my personal experience, lean towards 16. And so,
Hmm.
smartphones and social media to me were two separate questions. We got our kids a smartphone because communication, that type of thing. That we didn't want our kids to be entirely out of the loop. As far as in middle school, they had these ASB associated. What does that stand for? Associate Student Body. Anyway, leadership opportunities where kids are all having in these text threads, and there's this real social, not only pressure, but actual academic pressure to have access to something where they can communicate and do it easily. Social media access, and it's like Tim has already indicated, but this comes from all the experts that I've read and seen and talked to. Um, it affects girls more um, because of the way social interactions happen among women, among girls and women. There is more at stake. Boys can, there's absolutely things at stake for boys. A lot to watch out for there as well. But girls' emotional and mental health is really on the line. And so anxiety, depression, body image, all of those types of things get put into, play with earlier social media exposure. So there's lots of research that shows that mental health for girls around age 11 to 13 there's a lot more of those symptoms, and that's often tied directly to social media access and time spent on those platforms. So if your child has access to that, or if you are a child listening to us and you have access to that, I would strongly encourage you to essentially go cold turkey. Don't do it. Move it away. Move away from it. You can come back some other time, or at a minimum, limit your time strictly. The amount of I don't. I've never really loved the term screen time because not everything you do on a screen is all created equal. I mean, you can get on a screen and discover cure to cancer, for goodness sake. But screen time as it applies to amount of time spent on social media platforms or gaming or that type of thing, it directly correlates with bad outcomes, health-wise, mental health and anxiety, all those types of things. So that's from a parent point of view, but also then as just a podcaster that's trying to find out what the right things are according to experts and report on that. Teenage years, try to simplify them for your children. And while it might feel, as long as you're communicating with them well, don't just say no, you can't have that, because dang, that's going to get some pushback. But if you explain to them, this is what is at risk, this is why I'm making the decision that I am, let them have some input. But say, look, this is what we're dealing with, and you don't see it this way yet, but here's the data. Anyway, I've been trying to be very transparent with my children, which is why it's worked reasonably well, though imperfectly. It's absolutely the case that my kids come to me and say, can I get Instagram? Can I get Instagram? Can I get Instagram? My daughter started when she was 13, or earlier for all I know. And it had to be an ongoing conversation, had to hold the line until I think right before she turned 15, we said, okay, read this book. We gave her a book to read about the negative influences of social media.
What book?
Oh, The Anxious Generation. Is that what it's called? The something generation.
Okay, I was actually going to mention that book, but good. Yeah, The Anxious Generation. Yeah, that's a good read on this topic.
Correct, exactly. So The Anxious Generation, and so she had to read through that, and then she was allowed to get Instagram. And then we just encourage her to not be on her phone. It's a constant battle, because guess what? It's a constant battle with adults. It's the default to get just swallowed up in that kind of thing. And middle school, as this is a middle school podcast, it's where it begins. So establish some good habits here, some good communication patterns, and hopefully you can have a child, a preteen, a teenager that is able to feel like they are both socially integrated, but also have a strong, base of confidence and ability that is not dependent on, how many likes they have on their post or whatever.
Yeah. And if I could sound off on this, just as an educator, and I think the first digital footprint and health class that I taught was probably about 10 years ago, and so I've been kind of in this stuff for a while, and it's just understanding what is going on when you're on technology on these screens and in these apps. Your brain chemistry is being manipulated, and actively and thoughtfully and carefully, with the purpose in mind of drawing you in, keeping you in, and monetizing you in various ways. And that's not to say you should cut everything off, but be aware, understand why you doom scroll and do these things. It's not just because you're curious, it's because you're being manipulated and used in that way. I know it sounds kind of cynical to say it that way, but that's the truth of it. I make this comparison when I talk to people about this. When any technology that is adopted in society, there's kind of a learning curve that comes with it. And the first generation to adopt the technology generally pays the price of that learning curve. Think about automobiles. When they first came into society, things like stop lights, stop signs, seat belts, analog brakes, all of that stuff, shatterproof glass, none of it existed. None of it was even conceptualized until people started dying, and you had these horrific accidents that would happen, and a whole generation went through that. In fact, I'd say probably my grandparents' generation, born in the 1920s, when these cars were still kind of a new thing. And in fact, it wasn't, I think, until my generation was born that our society kind of completed an arc of safety and adaptation to this new technology. So my parents, for example, seat belts were kind of a new thing. They weren't really used. My dad talks about his family's cross country trip where all the kids just piled in the back on top of the luggage.
Right.
That's yeah, that's right. Your mom and my dad. It's unthinkable now. Um, we, of course, my generation, my siblings and I, we had 4 kids with 3 seats in the back, so we would just share seat belts. Now that's unthinkable, and kids have to be in booster seats until they're 12 or whatever. So and things like airbags and all this technology, cars are exceedingly safer now than they were 50 years ago, 60 years ago. And we kind of learned what the price was, and we've adapted. I feel like the same thing is going on. Now we are the first generation to experience this new technology, and there's a learning curve happening, and you can see the price being paid with a generation of kids who are overwhelmingly dealing with depression, anxiety, and all of these things that are kind of been blindsided by it as a society. So every person who is picking up a smartphone, who's getting on social media, is part of this ongoing psychology experiment where we have no idea what the outcome is going to be, but we are starting to see that the outcome is negative, and sometimes drastically so. So just be aware. I have a smartphone and social media, but when I use it, I always have in the back of my mind this awareness that of what's going on, what it's doing. Educate yourself. That book Carl mentioned, Anxious Generation, great read. I'll throw out one more, a book called Dopamine Kids, is one that I haven't read it yet, but I've heard about it and kind of looked at it, and it looks like it. So there's a lot of good literature out there to kind of educate yourself. Look up what brain hacking is and how that works, and just be aware. And then, yeah, keep your kids away from that stuff as long as you can. If you want to have quality time with them, and if you want them to avoid some of these negative outcomes. Anyways, blah.
A good way to sign off here, Tim, is to remind people, and people, I think a lot of people already know, but and maybe you don't like these individuals, but take the information for what it's worth. Steve Jobs and Bill Gates didn't allow their kids to have smartphones. Now, granted, this is already, 10, 15 more years ago, but they didn't allow their kids to have smartphones until they were 14. And these are the people, Steve Jobs helped create the modern smartphone. So if these people have vested interests in their technology, but are aware that the side effects of this technology are myriad. So it's useful to say, okay, this child needs to learn to interact with people face to face, and that's an important skill. I do think, and I'm a software engineer, I think useful things can be done on screens. It's important to get exposure and to be able to handle, the world that we live in, the technological world we live in. But I think it is important to recognize that over the last however many years, thousands, hundreds of thousands of years that our species has developed, we developed a particular way. And the idea that in the last 20 years, everything's changed means that we could blow things up by not being aware of what our biology is predisposed to do well, and so and that the changing of that will affect our kids and the way that we perform. So hopefully that's not too dire. I'm also generally a positive optimist, but I think it's worthwhile to at least be aware that these things happen. And middle school is a fraught time, and we need to, as parents, fight the good fight and help the kids, succeed as much as possible during the armpit of life.
And just one plug for middle school. I've all the time
Okay,
people
no,
say, "Oh, you teach." You, say again.
I said, no, that's enough, Tim. We're done.
People say you teach middle school. Oh, that was what a terrible time. But I just want to say I actually really enjoyed my junior high school years, and a lot of people do. It's not always bad. There are some tricky things, but there's a lot of good in it too. And yeah, I tell people it's kind of like sushi. It takes a while to get used to it, but eventually you get to where you kind of like it.
No, that's not true. Okay, we're going to finish. Okay, we are going to jump off here soon. We're going to do a podcast soon about books. We sounds so weird. We're going to do our book club series podcast again. We had a couple spikes in interest in that recently, so I think people are. I think they like that we've been doing some classics that maybe have. Anyway, so the Animal Farm Tale of Two Cities mashup, I think, was useful. So we'll have to come up with another random combination of books to talk about.
All right. Ooh, it's gonna be fun.
Okay, good times. All right, join us then, and we will talk to you later.